The question is there a number on the amount of immigrants that we can actually deal with? Because what we know now, as Ireland is presently run, we can't deal with a rising population.
Yeah.
We don't have the capacity or the will or the bureaucratic structures, because once you get an increase in population or a rapidly increasing population, you need more houses,
Yeah.
you need more schools, you need more hospitals, you need more public services, and you need a government that looks competent in the face of these challenges.
Okay, you mentioned numbers there, Mac. Let's talk about numbers in immigration and housing. What is the current state?
Okay, so what I think is important for an economics podcast is to have a data-driven, not emotion-driven discussion on immigration.
Yeah.
What we know is that the state doesn't seem to be able to deal with a rapidly rising population. I'll give you one statistic, right? House building. We're supposed to be building, obviously, more houses because the population is rising, largely as a result of immigration. House building fell in June, John. The fastest decline in over 18 months. When we're supposed to be building more houses, we're actually building less. And what happens is if you build less houses at a time when the population is rising, surprise, surprise, your house prices rise. House prices have risen in Ireland 7% in the past 3 months. The average Dublin home is now just shy of €500,000, which is crazy.
Absolutely crazy.
And of course, the punter pays. The punter pays, right?
Yeah.
So you have to figure out who is going to actually pick up the bill for all this. The reality is that immigration obviously increases the demand for housing, increases the price of housing if you don't build enough of them, right? Also demand for transport, health services, all that sort of classroom sizes, all that sort of stuff. Now, the interesting thing is economists talk about labor, but you can talk about labor, but actually labor is people, and people come with their families, and their families require what families need to live, which is hospitals, water supply, electricity, railways, schools, homes, etc. So unless you are able to actually provide the infrastructure for those families, what you're going to get is you're going to get a rapid increase in prices, or a rapid increase in waiting lists, or a rapid increase in traffic, or whatever, because you don't have the ability to, not the ability, but you don't have the actual managerial competence to absorb in enough people.
You've always said that demographics is everything in economics. So how have the demographics in Ireland changed over the last 10, 20 years?
Well, it's the last 10, 20 years. So between 1995 and 2015, total number of immigrants into Ireland was 1.1 million, nearly 1.2 million.
Yeah.
So that's a pace of around 50,000, 55,000 per year over a 20-year period.
Okay.
Since then, things have changed rapidly. So between April 2022 and April 2023, Ireland welcomed in approximately 141,000 immigrants. So you're getting an almost tripling of the rate of immigration, right? This is enormous. So, for example, if we were to absorb in 141,000 immigrants per year for the next 20 years, Ireland's population would be nearly 8 million in the Republic, not on the island, right? So we have had a very rapid increase in immigration in the last 2 or 3 years. That is putting huge strain on the system. But one other thing is going on, John, which I think is crucial for listeners to understand, is at the same time as we have had this massive increase in immigration, the ability of the state to run the country seems to me to have cratered. I'll give you a figure. In the last 5 years, since the pandemic, government spending has ballooned by 47%, from 71 billion to 105 billion. And I don't know about you, but I don't think we have seen any significant improvement in any infrastructure. We've built no railways. We've built no roads, no motorways, nothing. Like, in fairness to the Celtic Tiger era, we built the Port Tunnel, we built lots of roads, we built 86,000 houses per year.
Yeah.
Here we have seen government spending increase by nearly a half in 5 years. And there's nothing to show for it. So it's all gone into this black hole of a combination of expanded public sector, of increased welfare payments, et cetera, and what you're not seeing is the infrastructure that is necessary to create the conditions to allow house prices to remain stable in the face of immigration.
But why is this? Is this incompetence? Is this a function of a coalition? So there's no real decision making there, or, it's just so everything's so muddled. Everyone's trying to be all things to all men.
There's no leadership, John. There's no managerial leadership in the public sector at all. Nobody has skin in the game. And when you don't have skin in the game, when your job and your income and your wages are not dependent on your performance or some outcome, what you get is drift. Now, what we've had in Ireland is drift, and this comes back to the multinationals. The reason we've allowed this drift, or we haven't noticed this drift, is we've had this tax windfall from the multinationals.
Yeah.
If that were to disappear, so one of the problems is, it's always been said in business, a tight budget focuses the mind.
Yeah.
You think, okay, we've got to figure stuff out here. We've got a budget, we've got to meet our budget targets, right? A loose budget, like we have had under this present administration and the previous one. So the last two Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil administrations have led to the economics of populism, it seems to me, where government spending has gone up by an extraordinary figure. Like when we're talking about 34 billion increase in government spending over the last 5 years and nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
Except for the fact
the bicycle shed.
That we have a bicycle shed, exactly. And of course, rising house prices.
Yeah.
So the problem is that immigration is driving up house prices, as well as lots of other factors, supply problems. We can't keep away from the idea that demand, John, is driving up the prices. And all the while, you seem to be in this situation where the Department of Transport isn't talking to the Department of Houses, isn't talking to the planners. They don't seem to be talking to the IDA. The IDA are constantly going to the States looking for new business. They are getting new business. They bring the investment home to Ireland and they say, oh, well, we need 1,000 new workers. And we don't have those new workers.
Yeah.
So you import the people, you give work visas to people. Those people arrive with their families. They need a place to stay. They begin to bid for housing. They then elbow out local Irish people and people get pissed off.
Yeah.
And this is what's happening all the time. So it's not the immigrants' fault in any way. They are also, in a way, victims of a totally incompetent policy, which is not relating ability to deal with an increase in population with our ability to actually provide the infrastructure. And all the while, people are getting angry.
So, I mean, what can you do about it if you're stuck with an administration that we have and a civil service that we have? What can you do about it then? So before you answer that, let's do a bit of this.
Okay.
So, Mike, we have rising house prices because of all the pressures of immigration pushing up demand and a severe lack of supply. And we seem to have a government that have run out of ideas or hamstrung, or just there's a lack of joined up thinking. So what can we do about this?
So let's look at the fact. What we're doing is we're looking at house prices. If the housing crisis in Ireland is an emergency, as the state says it is, then the entire economic policy should be driven by making sure that house prices remain stable.
How do you do that?
So therefore, everything orbits around this target. So let's just think about it from the population perspective. The demand for houses is 4 issues, right? One is the natural increase of the Irish population. Now that is what you would call deaths minus births.
Mm.
In Ireland, that's running at about 20,000 per year, natural increase. So we have about 35,000 deaths and about 55,000 births. So give or take, we're talking about 20,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
Then we have net migration. Now, net migration is 149,000 last year.
What is the breakdown of that figure, though?
149,000 is broken down into the following, right? About 30,000 are returning Irish people who worked abroad or coming back home. About another 30,000 odd are EU workers, people coming from the European Union who are completely entitled to work here and live here. About 5,000 are coming from the UK, and they again are governed by our relationship with the UK. That leaves about 85 to 90,000 are non-European workers, a combination of asylum seekers, refugees from Ukraine, which is obviously that figure has fallen now because there's not many refugees coming, and people who are coming here given work visas. So it's that 90,000 that you can legally, that's what I mean, illegally affect as a state. So just keep that in the back of your head. So that's the breakdown of the population. So that's the second verse, net migration. The third thing that affects house prices, John, is what they call headcount. Now, what that is, that if you remember, when we were kids, the average Irish family had 4 kids and parents. So that's 6 in a house. Or 5 in a house, right? Now, that has dramatically changed over the years. And now, on average, there are 2 people in a house. Now, what does that mean for house building? It means you have to build more houses, because whereas there used to be 6 in one house, there's now 2 in each dwelling, house, home, apartment. So you have to build 3 of those. So as Irish family size becomes much more like the European average, you got to build even more houses. Right?
Yeah.
And then the last thing about houses is obsolescence, that, old buildings crumble eventually. So you have to replace them. So what you have is these 4 factors, right? You can't change obsolescence because that's a legacy issue. That's inherited. The amount of the housing stock that is over 50 years old. Down the country, that's quite a lot. Particularly if you go through country towns, you see, and of course, part of the obsolescence is dereliction and dilapidation and vandalism and all that sort of stuff. Vacancy, right?
Yeah.
The headcount you can't change because that's the way the society is evolving. Fewer and fewer people living in each particular home. The natural increase you can't change because why? That's the amount of babies are born in the country minus the amount of deaths. No, you can't change that. So then you've had to look at the migration figure, and you look at, okay, well, of the 141 or let's say the 150,000 odd who came in, right? You have 30,000 Irish, you can't change that. They're coming home. 30,000 EU, you can't change that. They're legally entitled to be here. 5,000 UK, you can't change that. So that's about 65,000 odd spoken for legal. Then the question is, of the other 140,000, we're talking about 80 to 90,000 who are here on the basis of active government immigration policy that you can legally change. So unless you take out a proportion of these 85 to 90,000 new immigrants who are arriving here, you're never going to stabilize the housing market.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. Do you know how many houses were built in the 12 months to April 2024 in this country?
Tell me.
30,320.
Okay.
So you have, right, think of it, you have 141,000 migrants coming into the country. You're building 30,000 houses. Of course you get a house price increase.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Yeah, of course.
We should be probably building for these 140,000, we should be probably building, if you take there's 2 people to every dwelling, right? Maybe two and a bit. We should be building up at least 70 to 80,000 houses, right? We're only building 30,000. So that means that we have a net deficit of around 48,000 houses per year.
Per year.
Based on present immigration.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing that's making that some way more palatable is the fact that about 60,000 Irish people leave the country every year. So that's taking some of the pressure off, but they are Irish kids in the main. So the problem with the Irish kids is when they leave, they don't vacate a house. because they're actually living in the box room of their parents' house.
Yes, of course. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I'm talking about data here. I'm not talking about emotion, whether they should be leaving and we should be leaving. I think it stands to reason that you should always, if your own people are leaving in significant numbers, like, for example, last week I saw there is an 1,800 deficit in the amount of new teachers, because it's not that the new teachers aren't being trained, but new teachers are just fecking off. Why? Because they can't get a house, they can't afford an apartment, and they don't want to commute, 3 hours a day.
And
right?
pay is probably better as well.
Exactly, and pay is better abroad in certain areas, right? Not many areas, but in certain areas.
Yeah.
So let's look at the numbers. You've got to come down. It's a numbers game. So if we have a housing deficit of 40,000 a year, then you've got to look at the 85,000 immigrants who are coming in here on work visas or asylum seekers, and you've got to say that's the figure we have to adjust downwards. So it's like any economic model. You put in your inputs and you get your outcome, right?
Yeah.
So you change your inputs. It's basic algebra. You change your inputs and you change your basic model. So if the state has said that house price stability is an objective of the state in an emergency, if they make it the number one objective, then of course on the demand side, you have to reduce quite significantly, maybe by half or more, the immigration figure that you can, which is the work visas, which are being given out. Now, lots of people will say, well, how do you do that? And this is just about, I presume, government competence. This is about government responsibility. The reason it has been avoided, I think, as a discussion, John, for the last while, is because of the same idea that has allowed public spend drift from 71 billion to over 100 billion. I think it's this idea of it'll be grand, there's no skin in the game, I won't take a decision, etc.
Sure, but what's the long-term implications of that?
The long-term implication of that is more and more people get squeezed out of the housing market.
Yeah.
More and more people leave the country. And what you're doing is you're doing what all Irish governments did since De Valera. They're looking to the emigration of Irish people as a safety valve in order not to confront their problems. So emigration in the 80s and the 60s and the 50s was an ability of the state to stay in power.
Yeah.
So as long as immigrants left to England and America, they didn't become a problem. They didn't become that problem. People on the streets, people pissed off, people voting. In a way, you can say that what is happening is not by design, but by default, that exactly the same is happening now.
But can I ask you though, I mean, there's an immigration problem all across Europe. So should, instead of individual states trying to come up with new policies and reinvent the wheel, as it were, should it not be a European-wide policy and border force, as it were?
Well, it's interesting.
That's getting a bit MAGA, I know, but...
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because not all immigrants want to come to the same countries. That's the first thing. And not all countries have the same demand for immigrants. So I think that the issue with immigration in somewhere like Ireland, the data-driven issue, not the emotion, leave the emotion for somebody else. The data is on the housing market. You cannot solve the housing market problem with the current levels of immigration. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
It would be possible if we could get house building up to 100,000 houses a year.
That's not possible either.
That looks as if it's not possible either. So something has to give. It's like Napoleon once said, John, because we like Napoleon. He's a friend of the show.
Yep.
He said, to govern is to choose. It's a great expression. So to govern means you've got to make choices. If you don't make choices, you drift. If you drift, the only way in which you can actually escape making choices is if you have high net emigration of Irish people, of voters, which is what we have now. Which is why our podcast is listened to in Australia, in America, in Canada, in the UK. There's a huge Irish diaspora, a current Irish diaspora, people in their 20s, people in their 30s, people who've left for opportunity. But one of the reasons they're not coming home is because of the housing market. They're thinking, fuck it, I'm not going to come home and live miles away or in a little shitty box. Wherever I am, I can get a better standard of living. So unless we have this adult conversation, which is data-driven about immigration, two things happen. One is the economy drifts, the society drifts. And again, the exemplar is the leakage, the fiscal incontinence, the incontinence in public spending, right?
Yeah.
And number two is you cede the issue to radical people because you don't have the gumption yourself to have the adult conversation with your own people. And that's what's happening in Ireland. And if you put on top of this, John, the potential disappearance of tens of billions or fives or tens of billions of tax money coming from the American multinationals as a result of Donny's tariffs, which I don't think will happen, but just put it into the mix.
Yeah.
You have a recipe for political, social, and economic chaos. And that is the way we are headed.